Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. It is my great pleasure to be here today to share with you our observations on where the next industrial internet revolution is taking our businesses, our country, our economy, and of course ourselves as individuals. So let's start with our story in terms of New Zealand. We have a unique role on the world stage. As Rod said, we are often masters of the weird and the wonderful and the things that don't always make sense and come together as an economy for a country. We are never afraid to challenge the status quo and pursue things in a different way with a different mindset and lens than others around the world. We are rich in resources. We have a clean, green reputation currently, which, as we know, is under intense discussion and scrutiny around the world. We are a socially progressive country. We are well educated, and we are indeed, and have been for a while, early consumers of new technology. We have a strong growth record. Our economy is in a fantastic space. We have the bones of a strong digital economy, whether that's our level of education, our broadband network across New Zealand, and also we have a good business reputation. We are seen as a good country to do business. We are seen as free from corruption, and we are seen as a place of curiosity for many business people around the world. However, our challenges are greater than that. When you look at our current GDP, we have a deficit. We believe a gap of around $100 billion. When you look at our GDP per capita, we are below our OECD equivalents, if you like, in terms of aspiring countries like Singapore and Japan, and we are well below even more countries that we aspire to, particularly through Europe. We have an issue in terms of rising inequality. We are 43rd in the world with that. And we also have issues in regards to low labour productivity and also a low level of connection and collaboration between science and industry in New Zealand when you compare ourselves to the world. And of course, we're also low in terms of the level of R&D that we do in New Zealand. We don't exist in isolation, and the last decade has seen a proliferation of globalism like we've never seen before. And that doesn't matter whether we are now consuming our products and services in a global world. Consumers have the power, and global preferences are changing at a rate of not the demand for different types of products and services. Things like Facebook, in terms of 2 billion users now connected in real time on that platform and growing, means that we are having conversations that are changing the way that we think, our values, and how we need to operate, particularly as leaders. Additionally, we know we have challenges in regards to climate change, and in terms of what needs to happen in terms of our industry, ourselves as consumers, and the increasing focus and talk around that on the world stage. New Zealand is doing very good work in this space. However, there is opportunity to lift that, and technology will only support that. Of course, we've got the future of work. One of the biggest impacts of the technology coming through over the next decade is automation, and McKinsey's study across the world and focusing on Australia and New Zealand shows that around half our jobs, half their activities have the potential to be automated through the next 12 years. The question is the pace of that automation, but that will challenge significantly us as individuals, our resilience, and our ability to change. Of course, we've got the rise of the ethical empowered consumers, and you look at the 2 billion or so youth consumers through the developing world and the developed world, and their preferences are different than those who may be 50 plus. And we see those ferocious debates on social media, and we have to find a way to bridge those differences. In an aging population country with an aging business workforce, that does not necessarily mean our preferences are what the world wants to consume moving forwards. Changing demographics, I just talked about that. Changing infrastructure. The healthcare revolution is a huge one for us that we're very passionate about. The opportunity to shift from an ambulance at the top of the cliff preventing your last health issues to total preventative healthcare and nutrition through the use of devices, sensors, and big data capturing information and playing that back to us. Phenomenal opportunities for our country and to help some of the issues that we are facing. And of course, the future of business is changing as well. So let's talk a bit more about that. We are heading into the fourth industrial internet revolution, having just come out of the PC internet revolution over the past 50 years, where we saw 3,000 times the impact of that technology on us as a society compared to the Industrial Revolution 150 years ago. We're all a bit tired from that, and just putting that in perspective, the key shifts was the power of the computing age, social cloud, and mobile phones. That's really what's hit us at scale over the past 40 to 50 years. What we are heading into over the next 10 to 12 years is a proliferation of that. It's on steroids. When you look at what's coming through with artificial intelligence, automation, robotics, big data analytics, AR, VR, when you look at 3D printing heading into 4D printing, drones, and on it goes. Your ability to understand what this technology is and coming through and apply that to your businesses is critical for our country. There are so many things that will be challenged through the next decade, whether it's us as individuals, all of our businesses, every single industry will be impacted by this. And of course, every single government department, organisation, agency, they will also be impacted by it. And of course, even our not-for-profit charity sector will be impacted in terms of the shift to social enterprise. So we should not underestimate this. It is critical and it is significant and important. I want to talk about, though, not just the impacts on technology, but it's what it does to us as a society and individuals that is equally important. And many of our conversations just focus on the technology, but not the flow-on impact through. So I've talked about job automation, and the issue is not necessarily the end game, because the view is that by 2030, sometime around that time frame, there will be enough jobs for everybody. The challenge is the transition, and making sure that we are educating our workforces, educating our young kids coming through so that they can participate in the technology and opportunities that will be thrown up over the next decade. The next impact is us as leaders and how we lead our businesses, our industry, and our country, of course. And while you've seen a growth, if you like, in terms of the breadth of leadership skills that you need to lead in a world of technology, such as things like emotional intelligence, we're going to see a significant amount of demand on new leadership skills to support this new technology coming through. And the sorts of things that we're seeing there is the need for ethical intelligence, the need for ecosystem intelligence to understand the ecosystem you're operating in and the partnerships, and also the need for entrepreneurial intelligence, so the ability to be agile and understand where this technology will impact your business or organisation, and then be able to pivot your organisation to take advantage of that. And the final impact is on our business models in terms of platforms. You need to be an organisation that is participating and partnering in your ecosystem for a chance to thrive through the next decade. If you are trying to compete it alone on the world stage through this significant level of change, you're going to face some serious headwinds doing that on your own. New Zealand as a country, unfortunately, naturally likes to compete individually. We're not as strong at partnering and collaboration as we could be, and that's a big focus for Callaghan Innovation and a number of other government agencies to increase that level of collaboration and partnership so we know our industry can survive. There's big opportunities that will come through the next decade to solve problems that we just haven't had the resources at scale to be able to solve. So when you look at the amount of alternative proteins coming through and the ability to use that to create food at scale, that will be something that's talked about in 10 billion mouths. In the event in Tauranga. When you look at things like the creative realities, the ability to use AR and VR to keep our people safe in terms of training them for complex and difficult challenges that they face every day, another huge opportunity. And there is a major opportunity to create an inclusive and sustainable technology. The thing I love most about what's coming through is the intersection between productivity, inclusivity, and sustainability in much of this technology. It just comes up to us to find it and apply it to the challenges that we have. So I'm just going to finish on our inspiration, which comes from Sir Paul Callaghan, one of New Zealand's leading scientists and physicists, a visionary who believed and knew that New Zealand was a country where talent wants to live. He inspires us in the work we do every day. It's wonderful to see him being celebrated this week through the Dancing with Atoms documentary and various other amounts of activity. And we take inspiration in terms of our whakatoaki, which is Rokuhia Te Wahi Naro, Hei Monga Tatai Whetai, which is explore the unknown in the pursuit of excellence. So I'm really looking forward to inviting our panelists up to stage now and to talk to them more about what are the challenges and the opportunities for our country to solve some of these issues that was clearly laid out. So if I can first invite Timothy Allen up, who is CEO of UpCo Bikes. He is a man dear to my heart, passionate about the combination of research, design, engineering, science and business through product development and innovation. So welcome, Timothy. Great to have you on the stage. And also that combination I read out, just have a look at his LinkedIn profile. That would be where we would say the sweet spot of success is through the combination of those factors. Next up is Emma Parsons, who's the CEO of Aggregate. Emma also speaks 3 languages, so come on out, Emma. And finally, we've got David Woods, who's the manager of Precision Seafood Harvesting. David is also keen in the areas of hunting, fishing, marathons, and curling. So who knew that? So welcome, David.
Thank you.
And I'll hand back now to Rod Oram to facilitate the panel. Kia ora.
Thanks very much indeed, Vic, for setting that really important scene about what we're up to in New Zealand. And I thought it would be a great way to start just to go across our 3 panelists, just to hear a bit more about the organizations they head up and what gets you really fired up about them. So Emma first, about Aggregate.
Thanks, Rod. So Aggregate is a joint venture between Fonterra and LIC, which is the Livestock Improvement Corporation, so 2 cooperatives. And, you know, I think we're really lucky in New Zealand. The nature of our agricultural industries is that they have evolved as cooperatives, and one of the very fortunate byproducts of that has been these amazing stores of data. And so what Aggregate does is it's a farm performance insights platform that's bringing that rich data together that's evolved over many, many decades and to help farmers become more sustainable and more profitable.
Fine, thank you very much indeed. And Tim, tell us about UpCo.
Thanks, Rod. So UpCo is a business that has a platform of utility electric vehicles, and then we have 3 connecting products and services, which is portable power, accessories, and subscription software. So really what we're trying to do is drive the adoption of electric vehicles off-road. Obviously, there's been a huge amount of investment on asphalt. If you look at all the big dollars going down, it's almost all off on-road. So over the last couple of years, we've had our vehicles running around in some pretty hard New Zealand environments and learning some good lessons and developing vehicles which we're now exporting internationally.
Yes, and so like Emma's business, just wonderfully grown out of New Zealand.
Yeah, definitely.
And what we're big in. So we've got scale here to do these
Yeah.
things, and some pretty rugged terrain as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
And it's I think a lot of what's happened in New Zealand is companies like in the US have taken vehicles that you get used 4 times a month, and they bring them down here and they get used 365 days a year. And they obviously tend to go west fairly quickly. We're sort of doing the opposite. So hopefully with the benefit of going from a high-duty 365-day-a-year environment to a more recreational environment. So it's no doubt an easier life for most of the vehicles we make.
Yes, indeed. Thank you. And David, the precision seafood harvesting PGP is a fabulous one. So tell us what your elevator pitch for it.
All right, well, thanks, Rod. For those that don't know, the PSH program is a collaboration between 3 major fishing companies, Moana, Sanford and Sealord. And it came about after some concepts and observations were taken out of some early research by Plant and Food when they were doing a Wild Fish 2020 program. And what the job has been is to bring together funding with help from the PGP program and take those observations and early concepts through to a commercial product, manufacture, regulatory approval, and then ongoing business model.
And just to catch up with the story, because I'm afraid I'm a little bit behind on it, you've now got regulatory approval for that new kind of, I don't want to use the word net, it's kind of an amazing plastic sheath. If you were here right at the beginning of the this morning's program, you would have seen a brief clip about a fish swimming through a plastic tunnel, which is essentially what it is. And of course, the great benefit of it is those fish are landed live on board, and therefore it's easier to return healthy bycatch to the water, and obviously have a much higher value product for as a result of an unblemished fish as it's landed. Sorry, I've just made your sales pitch.
No, that's fine.
I want to sign me up for the sales and marketing team. Yeah.
You're signed. I wish we could tell you that we had got the approval through, but it's currently in draft form. What we've found is that, there's been complications in terms of proof. We can show it visually, and obviously on the Seafood New Zealand advertising on television at the moment, it focuses on some of our handling systems and the fish coming on and being released alive. Fantastic clip, fantastic video, very easily understood by the layman. But when it comes to scientific proof, that has been an area that's taken a lengthy period.
But under trial regulation, there are trawlers out there using the equipment.
Yes, correct.
Yeah.
We've got 18 trawlers out there, from very small to very large, fishing in the hoki and snapper fisheries, and there's tremendous. It's gone from push when it was a concept to pull from the fishermen, and we're seeing very good uptake in the technology.
Yes, and fishermen learning some whole new ways, because it's quite a big shift for them in terms of the sheer technology and what their process is on board.
Yeah, it's been an interesting dynamic. We've seen a shift from where at the start the innovation was all about the design and the gear, and now we're seeing the innovation is coming from the users and applying it in ways that we hadn't even thought of at the start. And that's been really quite rewarding to watch.
I remember some of the early stories about Plant and Food staff in Nelson dangling plastic bags off the jetty, trying to work out a sort of flow of water through it. Sorry, it's become more sophisticated, obviously, since.
Yeah.
No, it's a great story. And Emma, the idea of having very strongly data-driven farming is a very crucial one. So can you just identify the main sources of data that's coming through? So obviously with LIC you've got great breeding data coming through, but what are the other main sources of the data sets that are going into aggregate service overall?
So at the moment we've got milk information coming in from Fonterra every day, so that's how much milk every farm produces. We've got all the animal information, so that includes the nature of the animals, so what their breed is, live weight, breeding worth, production worth, reproductive performance, all those sorts of data points. We've got fertiliser information coming through from Ravensdown. We've got financial information coming through from Figured, which is a farm management accounting software provider. We've got weather information coming through from Met Service, and we're just starting to be able to see the power of those integrations. So there's some really simple things like farmers have never been able to see integrated before the actual number of cows that they have producing milk on one particular day with the amount of milk that they're producing. So they've always been estimating these things, whereas now we can say, this is exactly your milk production per cow for this day, and also this is how this compares to everybody else that is producing milk and supplying Fonterra today. So it's, they're really powerful insights that are quite simple, but take a lot to bring the data together.
And I'm guessing that wasn't, sorry, I was about to say it wasn't too complicated to do, but that's never true about technology. But in terms of each cow has a tag, and therefore when it's going in to be milked, it should be very possible to be able to capture very precisely their milk production that day. So that wasn't the hard part. The harder part was the integrating it, was it?
Actually, what you're talking about doesn't exist everywhere today, so that sort of technology hasn't been, isn't necessarily widely adopted. And so there's a whole spectrum of different levels of technology adoption across the farming base. And so you'll have some farmers that will have all of those, that instrumentation in their milking shed, but then you'll have other farmers that don't have anything like that. And so part of the challenge, I think, that we have environmentally in New Zealand is that there's actually some really simple things we can do to improve performance, but making those insights available to everybody is a critical part of that puzzle. And so, we say, I don't know if this is accurate, but that 80% of farmers think that they're above average. And so actually, just...
As are their cows.
Yeah.
That's right.
So providing really granular insights and actually saying, actually you're not above average is a really important performance driver.
Yeah, absolutely. Just one last question, if I may, at this stage for you. Where does Overseer fit into that?
So Overseer is the model that is producing the nitrogen outputs. And so what we're looking at is currently more the input side of things, and we calculate outputs through Overseer. So through the nitrogen management program for Fonterra, for example, all farmers supply their input data that's put through the Overseer model, and we provide back to them how many kilograms of nitrogen they lose per hectare and how that compares to everybody else around them. So that data set will come in to the model, but what farmers will be able to do is look at a much more granular level. So they'll say, for other farmers like me, that farm like me, that have calving like me, that have the same type of feed as me, that have the same type of soil as me, this is the output. So it's taking that to a whole nother level of granularity in terms of where do you sit on the performance curve.
Now, I've got a big question about Overseer, though. It's been around a long time. It keeps evolving. Government and local councils keep heaping extra requirements on it. It's become a the most crucial piece of modelling to get nutrients right, so we minimise pollution of rivers. I've always worried, with all due respect for ag research that drives it, that Overseer, just in terms of sort of systems architecture of it and what's being demanded of it, this is really pushing the limits. And so my question, sorry, this is a long build-up to the question, do we actually need to start all over again with the very central piece of modelling software that reflects modern technology rather than an evolved product like Overseer?
I mean, I'm not an expert in the architecture of Overseer, but I think in general, we need to take a step back and start from what farmers need and what they are actually thinking day to day. And so, for example, so Overseer to them is a regulatory tool. It's a once a year insight. It's historic, and they're not making decisions on that basis. They are making decisions on what they see in front of them every day. And I think the challenge for us is to understand that decision making, understand the inputs into those decisions, and how we can improve those inputs so that they have really good insights driving their decision making. And it'll look very, very different in 5 years' time than what it looks like today.
Yeah, that was good. Oh, Vic.
No, I just basically kind of want to congratulate you on the work that you're doing, and also just say that it's absolutely crucial that we're doing that work. One of the biggest headwinds that I see for our agriculture industry and food industry in the next 5 years is not just the conversation that's going on globally around sustainability and practices, but actually as the new investors that were coming in. So you look at those who are investing in alternative proteins, and it's Bill Gates, it's Richard Branson, it's the capital funds that invested in Tesla, in SpaceX and Google, it's Peter Jackson. These people know intimately about technology and the power of technology, applying it, particularly data. And so I think, it's really critical that we do get these models right here for us to be able to respond back to the world when the challenges come around sustainability and impact on our industry compared to alternative protein. So we just have to be in that space. So yes, it's about farm management and doing that equally well. It's also about using that data to play back that we are playing seriously. I mean, these investors in this space moving forwards know intimately how to do this stuff.
And in terms of Callaghan Innovations' role, you're involved in all three companies, are you? In terms of sort of development and R&D help?
Yes, in different forms. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So you're seeing some real, across the piece, you're seeing some real integration of all these parts of the mosaic of the primary sector.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, we're very lucky to work with, around 2,500 businesses who are doing incredible things like the three here are. And I guess the ability, what we do is to help connect them, is to, yes, provide some support for R&D in various forms and programs, although for the likes of UpCo and that, you totally get that intersection between design, research and manufacturing engineering. But I think actually part of our challenge is outside of those companies and the industries that you're operating in, are they also understanding the scale of the impact of this technology, and therefore some of the headwinds that our customers and businesses may face in regards to turning to their industries for support and help is not always an environment that is conducive to where you see the future of your industries going.
Yes.
And so we can help be a voice for that.
Yeah. Now, as much as I love fish, as I do, and as much as I love cows, as I do, I actually really, really love bikes. And so I've been saving Timothy for last in this. Look, it just makes such fantastic sense to have electric-powered farm utility vehicles. Obviously very challenging in technology and terrain and climate terms. But you're making good headway. So tell us about the bikes you've got operational and selling, and which extreme environments you're selling them into in the world.
So the first vehicle we developed is effectively a dual electric drive motorcycle. And it was initially developed off-road, so I think as in typical New Zealand form, I mean, you just sort of start at the start. And so we started off-road unregistered. Was the easiest way to develop a vehicle. Didn't involve any regulatory or compliance work. At that point, we were way too small to cope with it. And as we've developed, I mean, we've then become, we've become able to deal with those sort of compliance issues. So we built the dual-purpose version, which enables it to be ridden on the road in New Zealand, Australia, US, and shortly Europe. And so that really helps, because there are many situations where people need to be able to travel on a road, even if it is more of an off-road vehicle. And then what we've then found is that, people in an urban metropolitan environment kind of quite like it as well. So we don't fully understand that part of the market, but it's interesting, and you sort of watch it develop. But yeah, the off-road side is where we see the blue ocean, because I think there really hasn't been a lot of effort and money expended. So when we are talking about it from an investment point of view, that's what we're positioning. I mean, it's 2/3. If you looked at on-highway motorcycles, off-highway motorcycles, ATVs and UTVs, I mean, in the US market, the off-road component to that is more than 2/3 of the entire market. So, and obviously our goal at the moment in the background is working on the development of these portable power systems. So that's an expansion of the power system we have on the bike today. So what we're doing is building an inverter into that, so it can be direct charged off solar, and you'll be able to run it independently of the vehicle and run a high peak rated appliance like a corded skill saw directly off the power system itself. So then the power system becomes like a modular product that's used in a rural environment, out recreation, camping, hunting, things like that. So, the advantage of putting a power system in a vehicle, travelling 50 kilometres and then having access to power for whatever you want is sort of something that doesn't exist today.
Yes, and an awful lot easier than putting a generation set on the back of your ute and going off somewhere.
And obviously you've got a portable power supply, which is, it's a lithium system. is silent. So, you know, it's when you compare that to a generator, and that's when you look at where some of the vehicles are used. I didn't, when I first started, didn't think silence would be one of the biggest selling points, but I think one of the first really heavy users we had, who was down on a strip grazing farm in Southland, and 3,000 cattle, he's doing 70 kilometres a day. We literally couldn't get his bike back off him to service it because he didn't want to go back to his old gas motorbike, and he said it was like walking around his farm again, but quicker, because you can hear everything in an ambient level, so it's quite refreshing.
Oh, that's completely fascinating about farmers sort of tuning into their environment because they can hear it again.
Yeah, and some of the reasons for why people purchase things, I mean, there's actually a lot of actually pretty genuine motives. I mean, when people sometimes say, well, farmers are not interested in sustainability. Well, I can tell you that we've got fleet guys who run 7, 8 farms and more, who one of the primary drivers for adoption of the vehicle is sustainability.
Yeah. I relate to this entirely as an owner of an electric car, plug-in hybrid, and an electric bike. I also pedal a lot, but the electric bike's fantastic to turn up like this. So I didn't come like this morning, but it was raining, so you've got to solve that problem. But no, it is completely fabulous, I'd have to say. But tell us about the service side of this.
Yeah, so you have to set up, now that's where technology is awesome, because, I mean, at the moment, we've got a direct connection to someone's bike through their smartphone, so we can do remote diagnostics, so we can see, we can tell you pretty much exactly what's wrong with your bike, even if you were somewhere in the middle of the US. And that's going to improve. I mean, we are probably going to actively be looking at blockchain from a point of manufacturing right through to the point of service, so you can actually see, in an automated way, what's gone wrong and where in a system. Because at the end of the day, we do manufacture something gets used in the real world, and it will get broken, and there are things that go wrong. So you have to build a really good service capability. We feel technology is one of the real potential ways of changing the way people are using vehicles off-road.
Well, and there's a wonderful question here from Sam that actually plays to this. Now that you've got 2x2 into the US market, what's been the biggest challenge, past or ongoing, going in developing that market from down here in New Zealand?
You have to understand a market before you enter it. Like I knew before I'd even set foot in the US looking to commercialise this particular product that the single biggest segment was recreational and adventure. So with that knowledge, that's how you market the product. It's the people driving RVs, it's the people camping. It's very different from New Zealand. New Zealand is 70% of all the off-road vehicles are sold into work. Over there, 70% of all the vehicles are sold into recreation. So you kind of have to understand that, and understand that the way of marketing is different. So to them, they're not going to empathise with a guy riding around with a bunch of cows. They'll empathise with 2 bikes on the back of an RV going somewhere interesting.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Just very briefly, if I could ask the three of you what you think your next big challenge is with your business, and how you're setting about tackling that. So perhaps I'll start with David on that one.
Oh, very clearly for us, it's about getting the regulatory framework in place to allow our gear to be rolled out commercially outside the testing permit that we've currently got. And we're busy framing up our commercial purchasing arrangements for manufacture and supply of construction materials, protection of the IP, and then the business model for 4 key areas of commercial activity, being the manufacture, the use, the know-how, so that's like a servicing type arrangement where you support the new technology with the experience you've gained, and then licensing.
All big challenges there, and the rough time frame where you think you'll have got those 4 issues well progressed and in a coherent way? 2-3 years?
Yes, well, we're setting a good foundation now. Obviously, the PGP program has a finite life. That expires March 2019. And then so the post-PGP governance is being established now to take it forward. There is an exclusive period where the co-investors get a first right of first advantage of being the first mover. And that goes through till about 2022. So we've got a 3-year time frame to solidify all those commercial arrangements.
Yeah, and a wonderful part of the story is that these are competing fishing companies that are collaborating on this.
Yeah, that's been one of the most enjoyable parts, is seeing competing companies come together and a shared benefit. If we get a strong, sustainable fishery, everyone benefits, and so that's overridden all of the sort of commercial sensitivities and between competing companies, and that's been great.
Thanks. And Emma?
I think probably our next big challenges fall into two key areas. One sort of technically speaking, we're moving into analytics and alerts, and so saying, if somebody's set themselves up a benchmark group, the data exists whether everybody else is using the platform or not. So if you can say, well, other people like you are doing this, and then get those insights out to people in lots of different ways, that's kind of the technical piece of work that we're focused on at the moment. But then the flip side of that is the capability and adoption side of things. So helping people understand how they can use the insights and how they can actually improve their performance based on the insights. So yeah, two key challenges there.
And the pressure on conventional farming systems from the likes of alternative protein, and indeed just from a New Zealand point of view of trying to meet we'll get there, meeting our Paris commitment, these are just heaping up huge opportunities for you,
That's right, yeah.
rather than say pressures.
Yeah, I mean, they just, I think farmers are feeling more and more that they need the insights to be able to find the opportunities to become more efficient and to become more sustainable. And so this is about providing that in a really easy way that they can just flick through every day and say, okay, I've got an opportunity here, I've got an opportunity there, and it's real time today. It's not historic benchmarking, it's right now.
Absolutely. I've always pushed back against the stat that some people use as, we've got a low level of percentage of engineers in the workforce. And I said, well, no, you completely misunderstand. Our engineers are our farmers who are trying to do something even more complicated than running a sort of a semiconductor plant, because it's an uncontrolled environment.
Yeah.
So I just have huge admiration for the way they're dealing with so many variables in their business that they can only they have no real control over them.
No.
They can just respond to them in the best way possible.
Yeah.
So the more you can give them some real-time analysis and insight into that is obviously immensely powerful for them. Yeah, thank you. A fabulous bit of data that came out of the Our Land and Water National Science Challenge a couple of months ago was that the average time for an innovation in New Zealand, a mainstream primary sector innovation, to go from beginning of adoption to full adoption, it was 19 years. Now, that sounds like a really long time, but in the US, it's 52 years. So I'm stressing very big technology change there rather than the latest thing. But I think that's a fine testament to how there is real innovation in the primary sector going on there. And the biggest problem of trying to, because I know there's a lot of confidence building by seeing what your neighbours do and whether it works for them. So these are all it's great progress. Thank you. And Timothy, how about yourself?
Probably the two big things for us is speed and scale, because it's obviously there's a lot of pretty big companies out there. I mean, the further we get in, the more you might sort of start to annoy them a little bit. And so I think, we have to scale as quickly as we can. And being agile is good because we're willing to try things which, other companies who, they're very structured companies that we compete against globally, they'll take 3 to 5 years to bring something to market. So, so the speed thing is our unique advantage at the moment, so we've just got to keep the pedal down.
Yes, yeah. And look, there's a related question, in a sense, from France here in the audience, that about how to grow into this fourth industrial revolution that in some ways the three of you represent. And this is a plea on behalf of someone who is now too old to have had a very different kind of education, but then feels is not old enough to make big change. So what sort of advice do you give people caught between that, in that age bracket there?
I mean, I think, we use people of all ages and stages, and so, I mean, the skill sets that people have and experiences that they've got, I think are equally as valuable. I mean, if you take a look at Tesla, they made a massive mistake in not looking more closely at how a company like Toyota handles manufacturing. And what's their first principle? A person has to be at the centre of the decision-making process, not the machine. Because a person can make changes quickly, it's more efficient, it's more agile. They use a high level of automation, but you read carefully right back to the guy who founded Total Quality Management, and he started out in a textile weaving mill, and he observed that he restructured the way that they worked and put one person in charge of 8 weaving machines by relaying everything out. That's how it started. So I think the thing is technology doesn't, I mean, if you lose the importance of a person and the way that you apply technology, I think you're unlikely to get the outcome that you need. And a lot of people are learning that lesson.
Yeah, and I've always loved the Toyota story because in recent decades, Toyota's been very open about many of its systems, but people still can't produce cars as well as Toyota. So to me, there's that elusive cultural element in there that others can't replicate.
I mean, they are amazing at what they do. I mean, even the forestry companies in New Zealand, I mean, they have 5 different definitions for the concept of waste. I mean, they do have a very interesting attitude to those things, and they're quite advanced. If you take a look at Jukunisho and Panpak in New Zealand, I mean, there's no other mill in New Zealand that runs at 82% efficiency. Wairarapa does that from a round log. It's incredible, They're using just about everything that comes off that log. Yeah. So they take that process into manufacturing. So you can read about it. I think people are important, yeah.
Fantastic. Just briefly on this question about how to be a change agent. Any thoughts?
Well, I would relax because I think the invention is the sexy part, and probably the face of the invention is a young 20-something who's recognised the original opportunity. Innovation is about taking it through to a commercial reality, and you've always end up with a team of 50 plus people with the experience to drive either the legal changes required, the health and safety around it. Like our gear, we've got those sorts of issues coming at us left and right, both legal, health and safety, the operating, the procurement, and you need experience. None of that is coming from a 20-year-old, trust me. It's coming from people that know the game. And innovation is not invention. Innovation's about taking the invention through, and you collect experience as you do that.
Yeah. And Emma?
Yeah, I mean, I would reinforce both those points in terms of diversity of teams, but also in terms of, the purpose of a technology is to serve a customer. And I always say to our farmers, if it's not working for you, it's not you, it's the technology, and tell us. So one of the things that we've started out with is that our farmers' index fingers would be as big as my big toe. Yes. And so if you can't make that work on the actual app, that is not your problem, that is our problem. Yeah. And so I think, I think that that's the challenge of innovation, is actually innovating for the person who's using your technology.
Thank you very much indeed. A very big hand, please, for Timothy, Emma, David and Vic. Thanks very much indeed.